Again, my name is Josh Henkin. This is physical therapist Jessica Bento. Welcome to our Why Fitness Keeps Getting Fat Loss Wrong webinar. I've been a coach in this industry for about 30 years now, which is amazing to be able to say. I started when I had hair. During that time, I owned my own training facility for over a decade. And, during that time, obviously, I dealt with many different clients that fat loss played a major role in their goals, whether I worked with young children that were in kind of middle school up to elderly individuals and kind of everyone in between. And having been a speaker at Perform Better for over 15 years now, I can tell you, hearing how people talk about fat loss is really part of the reason Jessica and I wanted to do this webinar, because I think there's a lot of keys into understanding the research and science that we keep getting wrong. And as someone who had a focus on fat loss for so long in his own programs, I can tell you there's things I was getting wrong. It wasn't until I really delved into the science and really understood what made the biggest impact upon fat loss that things really started to come together in me and being able to provide better programs. So I'll turn it over to Jessica, let her introduce herself as well.
So my name is Jessica Bento. For those that don't know, I've been a physical therapist for over 20 years now, and I've also lived in the fitness industry for about the same time. So I have one foot in the therapy world, one foot in the fitness world. And some might think, okay, why is a physical therapist talking about fat loss? Well, I work with a lot of individuals with chronic pain, and oftentimes weight loss, weight management is a key component in getting people to just feel better, move better, and help with some of those chronic issues that they experience.
So, that's why we wanted to do this. And also we wanted to thank, obviously, Perform Better for allowing us to share this information with you guys. Perform Better has always been a strong supporter of ours, giving us a platform to share education, giving better solutions so that you guys can better serve your clients. So hope you guys support Perform Better whenever possible, because they allow us to keep giving this education away, and that's really meaningful to us. I also want to thank to all of you that are attending this webinar. We know you're busy. We know you come to this with some real interest in problem solving, and that is really the driver in what we want to provide you today. Just really quick, because we know a lot of people tend to jump in and out based upon their availability. We will be expanding upon everything we're talking about in our online 6-week CEU masterclass that will go into an in-depth discussion upon all these topics. If you guys want more information, you're more than welcome to email Jessica or myself. You can also go to our website, dvrtfitness.com, if you need more information. Perform Better will also be sending out more information as well, but feel free to reach out for us if you have questions about the program and so forth. So we don't really need to spend a lot of time on statistics, because I'm sure all of you know that obesity is a major epidemic in our society. So what we want to do is really focus on the underlying issues of why. So a lot of times I hear people say things like, well, people just need to work out more. We just need to have more fitness resources. We need to, this and that, as though people don't know fitness is a major thing. But what we've seen over the decades is that fitness has never been more prevalent in our society. We never had more gym memberships. We've never had more gyms themselves. We've never had more personal trainers out there. So something is just not adding up when we look at that. If you also look at the fact that 50 to 57% of Americans actually work out for home as well, this adds into the idea that exercise and fitness is a major component in our society today. So why do we keep having this issue with obesity? And I think a lot of times we just want to boil it down to one thing. We want to blame one thing that is the reason that we aren't seeing results. And often that thing becomes, we just believe people lack self-discipline, willpower, the drive, all those other things. And we're going to really explain to you today why it's not quite that simple, and really the strategies we can do to really enhance how people are engaging with our programs.
Now, we really are losing the weight loss battle. So like Josh said, we're having an increase in obesity across the years, but we're also seeing more and more people trying to exercise to lose weight. So these two things aren't adding up really. So we've got almost half of the US adults are trying to lose weight over the past year. Half of the US population is trying to lose weight. And then if we look at the other stats, almost 67% of adults that are in that overweight or obesity category have tried to lose weight. So people are trying to lose weight, and they are trying to exercise. And over the course of the years and decades, what we deem aesthetically pleasing has changed. Every year it seems to be something new. We've got body positivity in, body positivity out, curves in, curves out, skinnies in, skinnies out. Literally none of this has to do with health whatsoever. And we're seeing headlines, bye bye booty, heroin chic is back. This is really concerning, because what you're saying is that you need to take something like heroin to even have the type of body that we're deeming aesthetically pleasing right now. And can we tell health by looks? Not really. This is just one excerpt. This is Ariana Grande for, I'm sure a lot of celebrities have gone through this, but what she was saying was when she was being praised for looking her best, or what everyone deemed, oh, she looks great now, she was at her most unhealthiest. She was depressed, she was drinking. And for her, a lot of people have told her, you should lose weight. And then when she loses weight, she's too thin, going back and forth. Imagine what that does to someone mentally. And are we really promoting health when we're so weight centric? The healthcare industry is very weight centric. The fitness industry is very weight centric. We determine one's health by their weight, and that's not what we should be doing. This is where fitness goes wrong oftentimes. Health is very independent of weight. And what happens when we live in a weight centric society is the consequences that we see are statistics like that. Almost all teenage girls have been on a diet by 17. This is just staggering. And these numbers are just going up. And if you look at 81% of 10-year-old girls are afraid of being fat. This is what happens when we are weight centric. Now, we're not going to take a huge deep dive into GLPs or Ozempic or any of these, but we do have to mention them because they are becoming so popular for weight loss. And we have to understand that there are many side effects to them, one being muscle loss, and that can be really detrimental. We know muscle mass is very important for health and longevity. Just knowing what these side effects are and trying to manage them is going to be important. And then also psychological addictions and things that can occur with these weight loss drugs, because the majority of people that are taking them know that if they stop, the potential to gain some of the weight is there, and that can be really detrimental mentally and cause addictions through those types of drugs.
And I know you personally have experienced so many girlfriends that find it almost easier to default to these type of medications or tell their friends to do so than actually wanting to participate in behaviors that
I mean, I've heard the phrase multiple times, why doesn't so-and-so just take the shot? Why don't they just do this shot? So it's becoming more and more popular, and we're not really addressing a lot of the behaviors behind some of these issues.
And when you see such caloric restriction being a byproduct of using these medications, it really has to go into figuring out how intensely can you train, how well can you recover. All these things become a lot more complicated. And again, when we see almost 40% muscle loss through these things, we do have to consider the weight options and health benefits that we see. In certain populations, obviously they're a necessity, but a lot of times they're being given out maybe a little bit too frequently. We're also seeing these issues, same ones Jessica was mentioned, in male populations. So oftentimes, especially growing up as a young man, and that got into working out, I didn't hear about a lot of body image issues with men, but we're seeing this become more and more prevalent, but largely become of unrealistic expectations that are being put on men as well. I thought this post was kind of interesting because it was called a dad bod. And, typically a dad bod is kind of a negative connotation. We typically think of as a guy that is a little bit out of shape and so forth and isn't as physically active. But nowadays, they're calling this a dad bod, someone who is obviously working out, someone who has muscularity to them, as still not being acceptable in our society. So what we're seeing is these unrealistic expectations are causing people to have really negative consequences. In a 10-year period, the amount of men hospitalized for eating disorder increased by 53%. So these are very real things happening in our society, and we keep perpetuating them, and we wonder why people aren't getting healthier. And we see this too. I've heard people in our industry criticize even elite athletes. I heard some people criticize people like David Beckham, who's a world-class soccer player. He's not muscular enough. And I find that really disturbing that we're criticizing the physiques of top-level athletes in the world as though their physique is not acceptable as well. And I wanted to share to you how powerful this can be. I think Men's Health did a really interesting feature on this impact upon young males. So I'm just going to play kind of the trailer to this documentary they did, and hopefully get you guys shifting our perspective upon what we deem as actually healthy.
When you're a little boy, you are always flexing and proving how strong you are. When you get older, you start looking at guys with muscle, and that looks good to you.
All my life, I've been like a skinny kid.
I really started to notice the way that I looked.
It became like a struggle.
I looked up on the internet, how can I gain muscle quickly?
You know, like on social media, like Instagram.
Being fed different people that have a specific body.
Six-pack.
Broad shoulders, super jacked arms.
I want to look like that.
The more boys post fitness-related content, the more likely they actually are to get likes.
You see everyone in the comment section wanting to get that body, and then you look at yours.
This rise in pressure of muscularity has driven many boys and men to become preoccupied and obsessed with going to the gym.
There's a while where I'd be at the gym for like 2.5 hours.
1 hour was never enough.
No.
The designers behind social media know how to draw us in.
Any platform, you'd see influencers that like have a lot of muscle promoting these different brands.
There are a lot of risks.
Most of these are not regulated by the Food and Drug Administration.
There were some nights where I just wouldn't sleep.
It was just like really bad.
It was just too much.
The next thing I remember, paramedics around me.
His muscles were just growing faster than his bones.
The algorithms got you, and it'll send you more and more of these images.
I was just trying to look better. Never knew that there was going to be consequences.
So some may want to write that off as the exception. And, as a young man who, started working out at 14, I can tell you I didn't develop a lot of those issues. However, I also didn't live in the world of social media 35 years ago. And so I know a lot of you are dealing with the issues that social media is presenting to you, with clients asking you questions about different things all the time. So this is where education really comes about. And our job as becoming educators is becoming more prevalent, whether it's running little mini workshops or giving newsletters or content that you give on your social media can be really powerful in combating a lot of this misinformation about what is healthy and the expectations people have in actually working out. Because if we just look at like how insidious this has been and just in sort of subtle ways, if you look at decades ago what an action figure looked like for young boys versus what it looks like now, you can see how we're feeding these false expectations to people in ways that we really didn't experience decades ago. So being aware of these things really changes the way we should be approaching people with how they set their fitness goals and what they should be trying to do in order to be healthier, just not leaner.
Now, is physical activity more important than body weight? Let's take a look. This was a large study. This looked at over 6,000 men and women for the span of 30 years. So this is a significant study. And they found, compared with inactive people, individuals who were more physically active had reduced rates of all cause of cardiovascular death, regardless of their BMI. So activity was most important, not their body weight. So what they're finding is that fitness is far more important than anyone's BMI or anyone's weight. It's about that activity level and their level of fitness and how active these individuals are to see that decrease in cardiovascular death. Now, I wanted to put this up there. Like Josh said, elite athletes are being told that they don't fit these ideal body types. This is Mary. Some of you guys might know her. She is a USA Olympic weightlifter. She competed in Paris. She's probably stronger than anyone watching this video right now. She is in the gym constantly, and she's replying to some of the comments that she gets all the time about her body. Go to the exercise or go exercise, get in the gym. You should work out more. And that's what happens when we live in such a weight-centric society. We think people are just unhealthy just by looking at them, and you can't do that.
And so we want to answer the big question, because I think our expectations are part of the things that impede us being able to be as helpful as we want. So here's a kind of a shocking thing. And to be honest, it was shocking when I started really going down the literature that any type of exercise is not nearly as effective for weight loss as we often think. We often think that the formula is exercise more, eat less, and you'll lose tons of weight. But it's actually not true. One meta-analysis that looked at exercise for over 6 months of aerobic training found that people result in about 5 pounds of weight loss. That sounds kind of depressing if you focus just on weight loss, right? That in over 6 months of doing aerobic training, that people lost 5 pounds. Now, people lost a little bit more body fat when they combined aerobic training and resistance training, but it was nothing dramatic. And I think that's the thing that we want people to understand, that I think where people sort of get disappointed and they don't become consistent with their exercise program is they think they're going to see these monumental changes just because they do things that are difficult. They start an exercise program, which is difficult for most people, and they are expecting, because of what they see on social media or what a friend told them and so forth, that they should be dropping all this weight, when in reality, we need to help them set more realistic expectations of what they're going to experience through this process, and also find ways to keep them engaged, even though the weight scale may not be moving as they like. And so we're going to go over a lot of strategies you can employ that will keep your clients motivated, things that are more essential than focusing just on their body weight. So again, we saw that aerobic exercise was a reduction of about 5 pounds. Aerobic exercise with a caloric restriction was about 10 pounds in about 12 to 26 weeks of an intervention with people that were overweight. So again, we're not seeing these monumental changes in body weight. So again, it's easy to say, well, that's just aerobic training by itself, but we see similar things with strength training. Strength training actually doesn't do much for weight loss. It can help with some body composition changes, in that obviously we're going to lose some body fat, we're going to gain some muscle. But in a 54 study analysis, so again, a study that looks at many studies, when you gave a minimum of 4 weeks, so a month, people lost maybe 1.4% body fat. Now, I think that's good, but for a lot of people, that sounds disappointing. It sounds too little. And again, it's the expectation that people have. So what we need to do is focus on behaviors and not just things like body fat and weight loss. So we do obviously want to focus on strategies that are most efficient too. And one of the things that I got really into in the late 90s was using high intensity interval training. And I know that's become a very commonplace for people nowadays. And it has been shown to be very effective in helping people lose body fat, changing body composition, but not to maybe the extreme that people would think. We get cardiovascular benefits as well. We see a prevention of muscle loss similar to that of a resistance training. And here's the confusing part though. When you do equal everything out of HIIT versus more moderate continuous training, the balance starts to shift where we start to see it being kind of similar. So then people often wonder, is HIIT really any more efficient or better than more moderate continuous type of exercise in losing weight? And here's what I would put to it. In the context of research, no, but in the context of real world, yes. Because one of the biggest limiting factors we all deal with is time that we have available with our clients. So the time that we have available, it does show that HIIT is more time efficient. So it may be something we prioritize more when people are with us, and then we can use other strategies when we're trying to encourage physical activity outside of the gym, because people do need to improve their overall physical activity, as you guys will see, if they're going to be in the hope of losing weight. But overall, exercise is still very important and powerful, even though it may not create this massive shift in weight that many people are looking for. It's a major determinant in reducing all chronic diseases. It helps people lead to more positive habits like eating healthier, getting better sleep, better mental health, all these things that together feed into a better weight loss program. And again, it provides a lot of times issues that like social interaction that we'll talk about the impact of loneliness has with people in their ability to lose body weight. So again, I don't want to discourage you guys and make you guys feel bad that, exercise is not as powerful as for weight loss as we think. It may be powerful for different reasons than the ones we initially thought.
Now, being more positive, this is really key. This was a big and very interesting study by Dr. Ellen Langer out of Harvard. She's a professor of psychology there. She was actually just talking about this particular study on the Mel Robbins podcast. So we're going to play it and have her kind of explain this for you.
So here we take housekeepers who, first thing we do was ask them, how much exercise do you get? Now, these are women cleaning hotel and motel rooms all day long. Oddly, they say they're not getting any exercise. And that's because they think exercise is what you do after work. And after work, they're just too tired. Okay, so now we take these women, divide them into two groups. One group, we're going to teach them that their work is exercise. They're told, working at the gym on this machine is like making a bed is like working on the machine. We teach them that everything they're doing is in fact exercise. So very simple studies. We have two groups. One group that now knows their work is exercise. The other group that doesn't realize their work is exercise. We take hosts of measures before we start and at the end. The two groups are not eating any differently. One group isn't working any harder. They're basically the same, except one group believes their work is exercise. As a result of that change in mind, they lost weight, there was a change in waist to hip ratio, body mass index, and their blood pressure came down.
Why do you think that happens?
I believe that our minds and bodies are one, and if our mind is set to see what we're doing as something good for us, it'll generally be good for us.
Now, just the belief is so important, and being positive about what you're doing is very beneficial.
And I also think because a lot of times people don't think they're doing enough.
Right.
So focusing on what you are doing and that is positive is probably more effective than focusing on you not doing enough, especially when people get into comparison with other individuals.
Now, there are so many different types of exercise that help with weight loss. And I cannot believe there's a narrative going around that, walking is an exercise or yoga is not good enough or Pilates is silly. It is really about finding the type of exercise that you can do consistently and something that you enjoy. That is most important across the board. If I can get someone to start a walking program, that is a huge win for me and my patients. So I don't like when people put down all of these different types of exercise because they really are exercise and they can help with weight loss, especially if you believe it too.
Yeah, and because one of the biggest indicators of whether or not someone's going to stay with the program is, do they enjoy it? Like Jessica said, I mean, we're all human beings. If we hate doing something, we're probably not going to stay too long on it. And as Jessica mentioned, I think the point there is to expand ourselves as coaches to different forms of exercise that we could offer people. Maybe it is a yoga program. Maybe it is Pilates. Maybe it is something that maybe typically we wouldn't do, and really see that there are certain people that are going to be more geared towards that type of training. So we need to maybe expand our own knowledge of different forms of exercise because we're going to have different types of people coming into our gym. Some people are more apprehensive. Some people like certain styles more than others, but you have to find ways to build enjoyment. If people do not enjoy the process, the activity, they are far less likely to be consistent overall. And so we also obviously have to look at diets, right? I mean, this is about fat loss. We got to look at diets. So this is a meta-analysis of over 7,000 people. And compared with no diet, the largest weight loss associated with a low carbohydrate diet was about 20 pounds at 6 months. That's a lot slower than I think a lot of people realize. And about another, I'm going to do my conversion here, 15 pounds or so at 12 months compared to the, almost 20 pounds at 6 months and so forth without the low carb diet. So again, what the biggest question I think a lot of people have is one diet better than another diet? And what the research consistently shows is not really. Not one diet actually does a lot better than any other diet. What tends to happen is people that get on diet programs start to become more aware of their habits, start to become more aware of their food choices. And when they make positive changes in those directions, that can lead to losing weight. However, they don't show this massive weight loss, again, that I think a lot of people would expect by following one diet. And I think what happens is when it's kind of a slower process, people think they're on the wrong diet and they keep flip-flopping around different diets. So again, I want you guys to understand, it's not so much what diet you're on, it's the one that you can be consistent on and develop the best behaviors and habits around. So of course, another narrative that we hear all the time is people are just eating too much. And to some degree, that's true. But if we look at between 1977 and 2018, we only see about a 200 calorie difference in what people's average intake is. And what's really interesting is the research showing that while we have increased our caloric intake, only by about that 200 calorie mark, that hasn't been able to explain the rapid rise in obesity that we've seen. So yeah, we're eating more, but not nearly as much as people may believe. I thought this was really interesting. Each American puts away about 195 pounds of meat per year. So everyone's focused on protein. Compared to the 1950s, where everyone likes to say people were healthier and thinner, they were putting away almost 60 pounds less of meat. So we have definitely started eating more in some regards than we did in the past, but this still hasn't explained the overall rise in obesity that we've seen. And I think what we also have to do is rectify with some of the things that we normally would say. I've been guilty of saying this too, that if you just take out or reduce 3,500 calories a week, you're going to lose about a pound or so a week. That actually doesn't add up in the research. The research doesn't actually show that to be true. partly because multiple things happen. For one, when we start to reduce our calories in consumption and expenditure, our body reacts because our body wants to survive. Our body doesn't know that we want to look better in our bathing suit. Our body's just worried about living. So therefore, things like our metabolism will slow down. We start to release different stress hormones or hormones that make us want to eat more and ones that don't make us feel as satisfied with what we have eaten. We also see that if we do lose some weight, we burn fewer calories than we did when we were heavier. So this equation becomes a lot more complex than I think a lot of people deal with. And that's why when people go, but I am decreasing these calories and they're not losing weight, we just go, well, you must be lying to me. You must be eating more. And oftentimes it's because we're not taking these other variables into account. So this is another video I wanted to play because this is where, again, people get confused. We hear social media put out these narratives and people end up not knowing what to do. So these are both physicians, one sells supplements. I'll let you guess which one that is, and really see why so many clients struggle to implement more healthy behaviors.
You said grapes are sugar bombs that are problematic.
They are sugar bombs. There's as much sugar in a cup of grapes as in a Hershey's candy bar.
Yeah, but that requires nuance. A child hears, a mother hears, grapes are a sugar bomb, might as well give them Hershey's. They will give them Hershey's.
Might as well.
Don't you think grapes have more nutrients than Hershey's?
Well, believe it or not, extra dark chocolate has some of the highest polyphenol content.
But we're talking about milk chocolate.
Yeah, I wouldn't give anyone milk chocolate.
Exactly. So why even bring the comparison?
So you guys can see why clients get so confused and get freaked out. I would have clients that would get terrified of eating fruit. They were worried about the banana they ate and so forth. And I can't tell you how many times I wish they picked the banana over other things they could be ingesting. But this is getting more and more complicated for your client. And this is where our responsibility in really educating people and educating ourselves becomes important because we have great influence on what our clients do. So let's talk about the major thing here, the calories in, calories out persona here, which is kind of funny as someone who's been in the industry for about 30 years. I remember when diets started falling out of favor because we had all the research out there that diets really don't work. And what we mean by that is that research shows about 80% of people at a 2 to 5 year period will either regain the majority of their weight or even gain more weight after they've been dieting. So we don't see long-term benefits from dieting, which is what we want for our clients. So dieting started to fall out of favor, but then coaches didn't know what else to do for their clients who come in with these goals. You guys want to help them with fat loss, but what should you tell them? So we just rebranded. It's like dieting got a PR firm and started going by calories in, calories out. So again, despite its utility for initial weight loss, so these strategies do work for initial weight loss, long-term caloric restriction is not successful. So again, what we need to do is focus more on behavioral lifestyle changes than how many calories people are eating. And I know a lot of you feel the pressure to show results to your clients, and I get that, but that will come just as well as if you get people to do these behavioral and lifestyle changes rather than just focusing upon just the caloric restriction itself. So again, we want to be more mindful of these things because again, a lot of times people go, well, if you stay on the diet, it'll work, but people don't stay on the diet, and that's kind of the whole point. So I just want you guys to see that in some of these cases, how extreme it takes to actually lose weight. So they showed that a woman who weighs about 108 pounds has to expend about 900 calories a day to prevent weight gain. That's a lot for people. And yes, people should be more physically active in their daily life, but that's probably a lot more than the 3,500 calories a week than a lot of people would think about. And when people took in or reduced 400 to 600 calories 5 days a week, they still actually lost weight, but not nearly as much as a lot of people would expect. Only about 8 pounds in a 10-month period. 10 months, you're losing 8 to 10 pounds, reducing 400 to 600 calories a day, which is around that 3,500 calories a week. That's why I said that math just doesn't add up. So again, we need to help people shape different goals, different expectations, so that they stay consistent enough to develop long-term adherence. You guys also, from a business standpoint, want long-term clients. We know it's less expensive to keep with your current clients to get new clients. And we also know long-term clients are going to give you more referrals, going to help your business. They're going to help everything about what you do. So we need to find strategies to encourage that type of behavior. So one thing I wanted to focus on too, the restraint theory is something that dates back to the 1980s. So basically, this is a basic idea that when we go by dieting, when we focus on dieting and we're just focused on, you're just going to have to be hungry. We have a friend that we know that did a men's health. He was actually in men's health, and he talked about just being hungry all the time. That was just something he had to live with in order to take pictures for men's health. And when we have to reduce our, and focus on how full we feel, we ultimately fail. That these things don't work for people. So just telling people to have the willpower to resist is not good advice. It doesn't work, and it focuses on all these things. It reduces our cognitive control. It cycles of restriction and overeating. We know cycling and binge eating is no good. We see these weight fluctuations, and we know yo-yo dieting your weight actually makes health worse than just being at a bigger weight. And again, people have a problem with motivation. So obviously, one of the biggest things that I think is a challenge for people is the idea that emotions and overeating and just dietary habits are linked together. I knew I struggled a lot of that with my clients. I had a client who I remember, she came in one day with there was a guilt-ridden look on her face. I'm like, Jen, what's wrong? And she's like, I had a bag of Doritos ranch chips today. I'm like, small bag or big bag? And she's like, the big bag. And instead of like being critical of her about it, we talked about why she did that. And I wanted to really focus on her just letting go of the fact that happened, but also look at what caused her to default to the chips and what other strategies we could employ so that wasn't her default in what she ended up doing. So stress and emotional stress are significant contributors to how people turn to food for coping, whether it's that they learned it from childhood, those are strategies that we learn over years, or it's the fact that our brains actually encourage us to look for foods when we feel stressed and emotionally distressed because, again, it kind of makes us feel good in the moment. But what ends up happening is that when people are overweight, there's also a lot of stigma that we do around that. So we'll talk about later about confidence. But one of the reasons that I always find funny, because no one ever talks about this, that people who are more fit are more confident is that they're treated better than people that are overweight. When you're overweight, you're sort of deemed as lazy, undisciplined. There's all this judgment that goes around you, even though you could be very successful in other arenas of your life, which only encourages people to be more socially isolated, which increases their emotional distress, which increases the more negative habits. So these are things that we need to really help people with. Stress, we know our society is more stressed than ever, and stress can be a major contributor to people's gaining weight. So this is why I also say that calories in, calories out just fails. So there was a really interesting study that they did with people when they gave them the same amount of food, the same amount of calories, same amount of macronutrient ratios. And I do want to pivot for a second. I forgot to mention that there was also no magical macronutrient ratio that showed to lose body fat more than another. Just put that out there. So what they did is they standardized everything, but in one group, they introduced a stressful kind of response. And what they found was people actually metabolized their food differently that received that stressful response to the point where they would actually take in an additional 104 calories in the same meal as the people that did not, which would equate to an 11-pound weight gain during the course of a year. So if your clients are in very stressful jobs, if they're in stressful relationships, if they have stressful issues at home, these can all impact, even though they're doing what you're saying, for them to either not lose weight or to actually even gain weight. So it's upon us to, again, expand our knowledge of what we can do and offer people to be more resilient in these types of situations. So I think these are just really important things for people to know. So chronic dieters frequently describe feelings of guilt and self-blame, irritation, anxiety, and sadness, as well as fatigue and attention problems. Does that sound like an environment that when people do face temptation or they are overwhelmed and not sure if they should go to the gym, are they going to make the decisions we want, or are they going to default to those other habits that make them just feel good in the moment? And research tells us they tend to default to the things that make them feel good in the moment. Moderate dieters are 5 times more likely to develop an eating disorder than people who never diet. So again, it's not focusing on calories in, calories out, the perfect diet, be perfect. It's developing habits and strategies that people can adopt long-term, and we will definitely go over how we can do that. And this is one of the things I want to point out because, again, things like self-compassion, being compassionate to ourselves, is actually more important than I think people realize, like I was describing in that chip example. So this is a very famous example. It's called the donut study, for good reason. You guys will see. So they asked two groups of college women who were trying to lose weight to eat a donut. In one group, they were taught to basically be compassionate to themselves. So, for example, I hope you won't be hard on yourself for eating a donut because everyone eats unhealthy sometimes, and everyone in the study eats this stuff. The other group did not get any of that coaching. Several hours later, they were given a bowl full of candy, and they measured how much candy people ate. The people that actually went through the compassion training actually ate less candy than the people that did not get the compassion training. So this was a major study because even if we fall off the wagon, if you will, or eat things that we typically don't deem as good for us, how we respond to those situations definitely have a big impact to our overall mindset and where we go from there. There's something known as the what the hell effect, where a lot of times when people do end up eating something that they deem as bad, they turn in and say, what the hell? And they spiral, and we all have experienced that, where they eat more and more and more and more. They stop working out. They feel bad about themselves. And this spirals all quickly to negate everything positive that we've done for them. So teaching people how to deal with these situations is also important.
So this type of shaming causes a lot of damage. So exposure to weight stigma is associated with psychological distress. When someone has that psychological distress, or they have this depression or anxiety, they're going to revert back to poor behaviors and patterns, whatever made them feel good. That could be poor eating habits. It could deter them from going to the gym, from getting outside, from exercising, from socializing, becoming a part of something that brings them joy or happiness. So shaming is really detrimental. It can lead to being like really bad, poor eating behaviors as well.
So I think what a lot of people know is, like, we're not saying people can eat whatever they want, but we're also not saying super restrictive. What we have to teach people is flexibility in their dieting. That seems to be actually the most effective, and how to deal with different situations in their life. So we'll talk about, when we get to goal setting, learning how to deal with potential obstacles you're going to face rather than just not going out. I hear that a lot of times. Don't go out with your friends. Don't go to that birthday party. Don't go. But that only impedes actual success, because the more social isolated we become, the worse people feel, and the more likely they are to go back to those negative habits because they feel bad about themselves.
Now, is the food pyramid really the issue? I keep hearing people say that this is part of the issue, is like, oh, the recommended food is the problem. People aren't even getting close to what's recommended on this food pyramid. We're not even touching the fiber recommendations. We're not touching the fruits. We're not touching the vegetable recommendations. So we're not even getting close to what they're even recommending. So the food pyramid has nothing to do with it at all. It is about creating better food habits, and that can take time, and it takes, some behavior changes as well. Disordered eating can be masked as a real issue when we're doing caloric restriction, when we're doing calories in, calories out, when we're in a caloric deficit. All of these terms are the same thing for dieting. It gets people really preoccupied with their weight loss, their food, their calories, with the dieting. People become all consumed with it. And this can lead to a lot of bad behaviors. They start making excuses to avoid certain situations. Like Josh said, they might not go out with friends or family or socialize or do any of these events where there might be food or distractions. Sometimes I'm seeing people eliminate entire food groups. We've got no carbs, no fats, saying certain foods are just bad and unhealthy. These types of caloric restrictions and diets can be really detrimental for people. And the stricter the diet, the less adherence people are going to have. So just take a second to read that. The stricter the diet, the less adherence, the less likely people are to default back to whatever they were doing, to fall off of whatever changes or patterns or behaviors that they were making, because that severity is really an issue.
So probably the biggest change in our habits in our society is eating out more. So one of the things that we can do immediately to help people is trying to encourage them to eat at home more. And Jessica's going to share some strategies of how we do that more successfully. But a lot of times we know if people are eating out all the time, they have less control on the quality of foods, the ingredients in their foods, food choices, and so forth. And especially now, it's easier than ever with things like DoorDash to eat out. It might make it easier just by bringing it home. And so again, we all know that fast food is also part of that equation. We've seen an exponential growth. From 1970 to 2002, we saw from 30,000 fast food stores to over 220,000. By now, there's way more. And the price, the convenience, and the fact that fat and salt really speak to people makes this an issue. So again, it's helping people acknowledge habits that they have. Why do they have them? Are you fatigued and you just don't know what to do at night? Or are you just tired of making decisions? And we'll go over problem solving strategies for that.
Now, how to get people to cook at home. So this is one of the biggest things that you can help change, because it is one of those things people get home from work and they're like, what are we eating? I don't know. We're just going to order out. So Josh and I are married, for those that don't know, even though we don't have the same last name. What we do, I will plan our dinners for the entire week. So I know what we're going to have every night. Josh does the grocery shopping. I force him to do it. So we have everything in-house, and each night I know exactly what we're going to make. I try to keep those between 20 and 30 minutes for prep time. And it might sound simple, but I've told many friends that this is really, it really does work well. And they're like, wow, we didn't even think about that. And they started doing it, and it's made things a lot easier for individuals. Keeping, vegetables and fruits washed and cut up, easy to access. It's going to make things a lot easier. Again, sounds simple, but a lot of times people don't do that. And then really just kind of finding some really easy recipes that you can put on repeat throughout the week can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, because when people think of meal prep, I mean, our friend Leslie Schilling, who's an expert nutritionist, she's worked with pro athletes and so forth, makes a great point. By that third, fourth, fifth day, the chicken breast, the broccoli, and the sweet potato don't sound so great. And nutrition's very much like exercise. If you don't enjoy it, and food should taste good, people are probably not going to adhere to it. So that's why, again, a lot of these simple strategies can be very effective. And it doesn't have to be every night you eat at home, but see how many nights a week you're eating out and see, can you reduce that by maybe 2 or 3 nights during the week? And that should start making a more positive impact and can seem realistic for people. Obviously, probably the biggest thing that's changed too is our consumption of ultra-processed foods. These are foods that are incredibly tasty because they're specifically designed to do so. They have tons of calories to them without much nutrition. And obviously, they can disrupt how we actually interpret our fullness and other signals in our body. So this is probably the other factor that has explained the rise in obesity more than anything. So you can see that our consumption of ultra-processed foods has blown up. And so this is definitely something we probably need to help people address in their diet. So I'm not so worried about you got to be low carb, you got to be paleo, you got to be this. I want to focus upon how much ultra-processed foods you're eating and what can we make better choices about. Because these have been very much researched and studied by companies to make them as appealing as possible. From the colors that they are to the textures that they use, these are supposed to be something that are enticing us all the time. And so when we combine that with being stressed, being fatigued, and other things, it makes sense that our brain goes to these things as a default. They become almost things that we go to just to feel better because they're designed to do exactly that without giving us much nourishment. And they greatly impact our food. And what we see is that they actually make our brain feel good in the moment, but then we see a drop off. And then we see a drop off, and then we have to feel good again. So we have to go back to that food to make us feel good again. And a lot of times what ends up happening is the what the hell effect kicks in, right? People are not feeling good. Because they're not feeling good, they eat these foods. But now they feel good for a moment, but now they feel worse about themselves because they just realized they sort of defeated some of what they're doing for their fitness program. But because they feel bad, they need to feel good again. So they go back to the food again. And that's where you see people spiral very easily. And so again, these can be kind of almost addictive. I don't want to say addictive in the sense of alcohol and smoking, but they activate certain areas of our brain that are very similar to what we would see in other types of addictions. And again, our diet impacts our mood, but our mood also impacts our diet. So understanding how people can manage their emotions and manage these stressors and manage fatigue, also make them awareness and mindful of these actions become really important in giving them substitutions. Just telling people to resist these foods isn't enough of a strategy. We need actually teaching people strategies that when they feel these cravings, when they feel these urges, when they feel badly, what can they do instead? So I just want you guys to understand that being overweight is both a psychological, a psychosocial, and a biological stress, and is related to things like depression, anxiety, and so forth. So one of the things we talked about, we're stressed out more than ever. And one of the ways that we're very stressed out is that we have a very lonely society. And loneliness isn't just about being alone. You can be in a group of people, but not really connect with people and feel very alone. And we see that loneliness can trigger the body's stress response, which increases chronic inflammation, which reduces sleep habits, reduces our immunity, and also encourages our brain to seek out feeling good activities, such as those ultra-processed foods or other habits that we default to feel much better. So again, when we look at chronic stress, the study concluded that obesity is significantly related to psychological factors, including psychosocial stress. We're seeing that loneliness and stress are just as damaging as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And that, again, compared to obesity, probably chronic stress is a bigger killer and more related to more chronic diseases overall. And one of the surprises, I think, and to illustrate this point, is that when they measured people that scored higher, what are called adverse childhood experience tests, those are tests of people who had childhood trauma. It was, if you scored higher on these ACE tests, you were 46% more likely to become overweight because of emotional dysregulation. Also, sometimes people do inadvertent things like this happens a lot of times with women who have been sexually assaulted or molested at times, that they'll actually make themselves heavier so they seem less desirable. So then again, I want you to understand we have to look at whole people and not just diets and whether or not you have the willpower or not. Why does this happen? Because it creates all types of dysregulation in our body that, again, I think one of the major ones is that association between food addiction and childhood trauma are very significant. Now, I'm not asking you guys to delve into people's childhood trauma. I'm asking you to be aware that this could be a factor and why they may remain so dysregulated, and looking for strategies that can make them feel more in control of what's going on with them themselves. So again, stress promotes irregular eating patterns and strengthens networks of just trying to feel good. And this becomes exacerbated when we're overweight. Again, people turn to really tasty, really ultra-processed foods when they don't feel good. So again, looking for strategies of what do we coach people to do when they feel stressed out, overwhelmed, they feel really fatigued, like they don't have the willpower. What do we do then? And again, I think this is really interesting too, that stress can actually lead people to have an abnormal sensation of hunger. So again, strategies like mindfulness can be really powerful here because we can have people sit with the sensation and determine what they're actually feeling. And again, there's a whole science of what's called metabolic psychiatry now. So metabolic psychiatry is seeing how our metabolic systems, are actually tied into our mental health and vice versa. And they're finding an incredible connection between the two. There's also something called psychoneuroimmunology, where we see how our psychology impacts our nervous system, our immune system, and all the different systems of our body. Several years ago, I went to Harvard Medical School symposium on whole person health, and this was a major factor in looking at why people keep getting sicker, and a lot of it has to do with how we manage our stress factors. So we can't just tell people to manage their stress, we got to give them strategies how to do so. And this even impacts things like the hormones in our digestive system. So we actually see changes in the hormones in the digestive system, if I could talk, that really impacts, again, how people digest food, as we saw earlier in this study, also how full people think, and other things that impact people. So again, just eating well is not enough. We have to look at whole person health in the process. So what can we do? So one of the biggest things that we're going to break down more in our online program is mindful-based strategies. I know everyone's probably heard the word mindfulness. My experience as someone who's had to engage with it a lot for my own health issues is that most people don't understand what it actually means. It's kind of like a buzzword. No one knows what it means, but it's provocative. But we can use mindfulness in our eating habits, in our stress sensations, and our emotional feelings. We don't have enough time to go into them a lot today, but they are very powerful in helping people manage the effectiveness of a lot of the things that they're enduring, and allows them to change their relationship in a lot of these circumstances so they can break the habits of defaulting to things like going those ultra-processed foods or eating things that they normally wouldn't eat just because they don't feel well. And so we also have to get into does exercise improve self-confidence? Because that's something we hear about all the time. Well, there is true, because again, you might be thinking, well, if just people who worked out, they wouldn't feel so stressed. They wouldn't feel so bad. I mean, I hear people talk about, well, exercise helps mental health, and it can. But what they find is when you're talking about physical activity in the form of hobbies, whether it's going for mountain biking, maybe going for a hike, or you playing recreational sports with friends, it does improve confidence. It does improve self-well-being. Where things get a little bit more complex is when we start getting into more gym environments and our focus becomes more weight loss or fat loss, where people can actually suffer what's called social physique anxiety. That's not, it sounds complicated, but it's pretty easy to understand. You walk into a gym as someone who's deconditioned, maybe overweight. You're afraid of being judged. You're afraid of comparison. You're afraid of, again, not doing well, embarrassing yourself. All these things play out. And honestly, being on social media, how many times do we see people filming and judging people who are overweight in the gym? Or someone posts themselves doing a sport who's overweight and people go, look how fat they are, why they should be embarrassed by themselves. So we can see why people actually develop these things. So when we focus more on accomplishment through activity, like skill development, maybe it's running more, maybe it's going to the gym more frequently versus just weight loss, we can see that confidence change quite dramatically. So I just want to remind people, this biopsychosocial model of health, our biology, our psychology, and social influences all matter. And the word health comes from the old English word of wholeness. So if we're only addressing people's diet, if we're only addressing their exercise program, we're probably not going to reach the state to give people the consistency and the strategies they need to make significant changes. So how do we create better goals? So I think that's really a key too. And I know we're limited on time here, but we're going to get through this. So for one, we want to ask what a goal means to someone. So if someone says, I want to lose 20 pounds, why 20 pounds? What does that mean? And if someone says, well, that's when I looked my best when I was 16, and now you're 46, we do have to ask the question, is that realistic? Is that something we should expect ourselves at 46 to be the same as a teenager? Right? What does it mean to you? If you want to look your best, then there are other ways that we can accomplish our goal. And what does looking your best mean to you? Why is that really, really important? Is the goal in conflict with other aspects of their life? As we age, our priorities, our values change. So if we're starting to set goals that are also in conflict with that, maybe it's like, hey, I have this super intense fitness goal, but that requires me not to spend so much time with my family. And because I already work a lot, that means even less time with my family. And that's important to you. That may not be realistic because now those goals are in conflict with one another. And probably most importantly, have we identified obstacles to that goal? So again, we are all going to face obstacles. It might not be having social support at home. It might having crazy work hours and schedules. How are we going to address these things when they arise? And so something I wanted to explain to you guys too, I think this is really good. This is from career development psychology. There's a story of like 3 bricklayers and how we sort of have the mindset of our goals is really important too. So there's 3 bricklayers. And so one bricklayer goes, I'm just laying bricks. So this would be like, I'm just going to the gym. I'm just going to do a workout. That's just a task-oriented person. They definitely don't generally keep a lot of motivation and don't keep a lot of consistency in what they're doing because it's just a task. I have to go to the gym and work out. It's not really inspiring to people to be consistent long-term. The second person goes, I'm building a wall. So they have a goal, but it's not super, specific. It doesn't really mean a lot to the individual. It doesn't really empower them as much either. So they're better than the task person, but they're probably not going to be as consistent we want either. The other bricklayer goes, I'm building a cathedral. So they have like this big vision. They have something that's purposeful and meaningful to them. So again, when we can do that, like, why do you want to lose weight? You want to lose weight so that you can have better quality life with your family. You can play with your kids more. You can do more things. You want to feel your best so you have more confidence. These are the things that we need to help shape people with their goal setting. And this is where we get into like open goal setting versus very specific. And I know this is going to be shocking to a lot of people because I used to do a very specific goal setting. But what they show a lot of times with beginners is that we want to have an more open goal setting. This is a little bit more vague for people. So instead of going, I'm going to walk 10,000 steps, you're going to have people track how many steps they can walk each day. Because what ends up happening is that if you give the goal of 10,000 steps, if they don't achieve 10,000 steps, they feel like what? They failed. They failed. There's not a program I can do. I can't be consistent with this. They tend to be, again, people that fall off more. But if you get people to start being aware of how many steps they do, maybe they went from 1,500 to 3,000 steps. While that's far away from 10,000, that's doubling their physical activity. And that's something they can feel really good about. And that raises awareness for them too of what their habits and activities are really like. So again, it could be lots of different things, exploring different types of physical activity and seeing what they enjoy. Also focusing on what do people like as well as what they need is really important. We can still use measurements here. We're still measuring things, but we're just focusing what we're measuring. How many days a week did I train is something we can measure. I trained 2 days a week. That was my goal. I feel good about that. I'm on the right track. I was able to, again, work out, 3 hours this week. That's a measurable goal that people can feel really good at, because we all get people, I know I did, that people think I'm not a gym person. This is not something I can do. So the other thing we want to do is also embrace flexibility. And this, I think, is one of the most important things to share with you guys, because I know I always try to get people in very strict schedules. Some people are going to like really strict schedules. But Dr. Katie Milkman, who's an expert in behavioral psychology, is going to explain a really interesting study they did at Google to improve exercise adherence that I think is going to change your mind.
Points to a study that my collaborators and I ran at Google with about 2,500 of their employees who wanted to build workout habits, where we randomly assigned those employees to different ways of trying to build those habits over a 1-month period. And then we actually weren't interested in what happened during that month. We wanted to see what happened afterwards.
Yeah.
So in that month, we either rewarded them basically for going at the same frequency in both groups, but one group, they're really encouraged to go at a consistent time of day when they go. The other group is rewarded for more variability. So we end up with 2 sets of people. One goes 85% of the time, same time of day, every day, right? They're 7 a.m. people or they're 7 p.m. people. They're really consistent. The other group is more varied in when they go. Sometimes it's 7, sometimes it's noon. Both groups have a first best plan and get a reminder to go then, but one's more loosey-goosey about the when.
Yeah.
And then the question was, after this month startup period, who is more consistent about building a habit? Who goes to the gym more net? And to our surprise, I will say, and the surprise of the vast majority of psychologists who we asked which will work better, what we see is actually that the group that's less consistent in the time when they go, that's less rigid, builds a more robust habit around gym attendance. They're slightly less likely to always go at that sort of magic hour that is their preferred time, but they go more net because basically if something gets in the way, they have learned how to fall back on a backup plan, and that turns out to matter the most for getting it done. You need first best, but you also need second best. And if you become too rigid because you're like a 7 a.m. or bust person, or a 5 miles or bust workout, then you're not going to accomplish as much. So we need to make it fun, and we need to have a mindset of sort of being more elastic about how we'll achieve our goals as opposed to rigid. There's not just one way to get it done. You need to find, plan A, okay, have that ready to go with your cue and so on. But what's your plan B? And be ready to fall back to that too, and practice it. When you're sort of trying to build a new habit, you want to practice the resilience you're going to need.
So I've been talking about that with a lot of the obstacle addressing, right? You can plan it, but helping people understand if they can't come in the time, what else can they do and how can they work out? They might be doing a shorter workout session with you. It might be doing a Zoom workout with you. It might finding other strategies like other times of day that you have open for them, another class they can jump into. You have to help people see that if things don't go according to plan, there's still a way they can fit into the program. Because that's really key, because when people think they don't fit into what you plan, that they're failing and they're not able to be consistent with what you want them to do. So again, that importance of problem solving, I think, is highly underrated. We need to spend considerable time to help people understand problem solving. And this is a great opportunity for you guys to run mini seminars for your clients, to reach out on newsletters, to do things on social media, to give this so they can share it with other people too that might think that they aren't the types that can do a gym program because they keep running into these obstacles and no one's actually addressed how can they still live their life and find time to do the gym rather than just making people feel guilty about it. So again, I think we can use a SMART principle, but that tends to work better for people that already built the habit. So we get more specific, more measured, all these things when people are more consistent with what they're already trying to build. And just realizing that not just because someone's coming to your gym, they're not all at the same point of what they're willing to commit to and what their preparation is. So again, we just have to realize that we have to be more mindful and more thoughtful about who are we dealing with and what stage of commitment are they actually working at?
Now, is not enough time a real barrier? Yes, it is.
As we're running out of time.
Yes, we are running out of time, so we might have to skip through some slides because I know a lot of people are jumping off. But time is a real barrier. I know oftentimes people think it's not. It 100% is. And going to the gym is a task for a lot of people. It's just another box that they check off on what they need to get done for the day. So like Josh has already mentioned, can we decrease some of that duration? So maybe it's 30-minute workouts instead of hour workouts, offering those Zoom sessions, but be really careful about taking away people's stress management tools. Not saying, if you have time to sit on the couch and watch an hour of your favorite show, then you have time to work out. Not understanding that stress management can look like watching a television show. It can look like going out and socializing with friends. So be very, very careful about telling people to take away some of those stress management tools and see if we can accommodate people's time a little bit better. Do we have enough time, or do we want to flip through?
We'll flip through this.
Okay. So we're going to skip through a few, but fear messaging and fear is just not a good tool across the board. Kind of what you're seeing here, I showed this, I saw this going around social media too, and that's fear-based messaging. And it can work for the short term, but not the long term. Invoking fear into someone can probably push them away. If you're a clinician, they might not come back to see you. If you're a trainer and you put this fear messaging on, saying you're going to die if you don't lose weight, they might not come back to you. It's really not a good way to speak to an individual, to educate an individual. So just know it might have some short-term benefit, but long-term, fear-based messaging is not the right way to go. And body positivity, we kind of threw that out the window. I don't know where it went, but we really do need to bring it back because it is very imperative. You saw those statistics with the young girls, but women overall, look at that. Almost all women have some sort of dissatisfaction with their body. And those numbers are only going up because we're more about body positivity right now. And that can lead to poor eating behaviors. It can eating disorders. And we're seeing this in men and youth as well. Young men are experiencing poor body dissatisfaction as well.
Yeah. And so again, I think people misunderstand it. It's just feeling like you're worth it and appreciating yourself. You can still want to make change because again, we see on social media that people are putting out this idea that you can't be healthy at different sizes. And we've already proven that the science says otherwise, but you're more likely to make change if you feel good about yourself and you're worth it than if you bash yourself all the time.
Yeah. So it really does set the stage for positive changes to occur. Body appreciation was shown to predict decreased depressive symptoms and increased self-esteem. So just feeling like you are worth it, feeling like you belong can really set the stage for better behaviors to come about versus pushing someone into a depressive state or pushing them away from wanting to make any changes.
So just a quick note about genetics. Yes, it matters, but what I want to message here is that no matter what your genetics are, that you can always make a difference. And so just my major point is that not everyone's going to achieve the same outcomes if you follow the same nutrition and diet program or workout program, which I think a lot of people think they will, that our genetics will influence a lot of this. So again, some of this is cultural, some of this is from learned behaviors from childhood, but some of this is also genetic. And we also know that factors like chronic pain can greatly impact people's ability to adopt more healthy lifestyles. And a study that looked at people for over 2 years found that people in chronic pain lost 33% less weight than people that did not have chronic pain because of the stress that chronic pain incurs.
So why don't they talk about exercise? This is another thing that I keep hearing people proclaim on the internet is that nobody is talking about exercise. Everyone is talking about exercise. I can't tell you how many times I've signed off with just my own primary care physician where they're like, well, you should diet and exercise. You should diet and exercise. And doctors are prescribing physical therapy across the board for individuals, regardless of what's going on, just so that they can have more activity and more supervised exercise. This is just from the American Heart Association, but everyone really is talking about exercise and recommending exercise. It becomes the non-adherence, right? So you're recommended to do exercise, but people might start a program and not stick with it. And that's where we start to see the problems is that people aren't sticking with these programs.
That's why we focus so much on behavioral change in this talk. Yes. So again, understand that weight loss is complicated, right? It's dealing with the biology, the psychology, and the social influencers. If we don't deal with all three and their interconnectedness, we're not going to help people like all of you want.
Now, before you guys hop off, we are going to do a Q&A. We'll stick around and answer any questions that you guys might have. But like we said earlier, this is going to lead into something that we're going to take a much deeper dive into why fitness is really failing fat loss and to kind of go over a little bit more on how we can make those changes and how we can dive deeper into behavioral changes. This class starts on October 28th. It'll run for 6 weeks, live sessions every Tuesday. We'll run for about an hour with a Q&A after that goes for about 20 or 30 minutes. It's not mandatory to attend the live sessions. Everyone receives the recordings. It has been approved for 10 contact hours with NASM at this time. And I don't know if you want to add anything.
I just really appreciate everyone's time. We're going to spend a couple minutes going through some questions, but we'll pull up the questions here. All right. Can you address menopause?
So that is something, yeah. So that is definitely something we're going to dive into the 6-week class. We didn't touch on it today, obviously for time constraints, but we will kind of talk about what happens during menopause, why people have this narrative that you are going to gain weight. The majority of the research really says that you don't have to gain weight during menopause. That's pretty much across the board with a lot of the research out there. There is a lot of other aspects that we need to touch on as well. But I know there is this fear around hitting menopause and gaining weight during that, but that doesn't have to be the case across the board.
Yeah, without going too much into it, because it's something that Jessica's going to dive deeply into, I just want to echo a lot or something and add in just like everyone's obviously going to be different in how they experience menopause, but also there's tons of research that talks about our attitudes towards menopause really also changes our outcomes. The more we're worried about it, the more we're stressed about it, the more severe symptoms people actually experience. It can be more damaging. And now that's become a largely multi-billion-dollar industry. And a lot of that fear messaging that Jessica's talked about really gets reinforced. And I think that makes people crazy. I know you have girlfriends that have a lot of fear-based messaging in their head, and more than likely they're going to experience more problems than people that just sort of learn to address them, with their physician, understand, what to expect and how to manage it more successfully and effectively.
Yeah.
About parenting in the gym, absolutely. And we had a slide, we went over it quickly. One of the obstacles that a lot, I think, trainers face, I know I faced it in my own facility, is that most personal training studios don't have childcare.
Yeah.
And so not having childcare is a big advantage that big box gyms tend to offer. And so we have to realize when people are like, well, it's hard being a parent that also works and the different hours that they might be available because of their childcare does make a major impact. And that's where you may want to look at avenues, whether it's decreased session length or encouraging people to join specific Zoom sessions. You can even make it the special parent hour online that you do. So yeah, it's definitely an issue for a lot of people. Because I don't think personal training studios can employ, childcare. So you're going to have to look at other avenues of how you can make it more accessible. Maybe taking a survey of what hours people feel like they are available. If they really struggle with that, if that's just really hard for them to be consistent with, that's where things like Zoom can be a really powerful tool. And like I said, if you make it kind of a class for parents, it might be something that you can build community around, which might also help them do problem solving with each other really effectively.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed this.
Yeah, the artificial sugar, there's not a lot of evidence that, a lot of sweeteners, change people's body weight. But I think overall, it goes back to the amount of consumption. So I had a client who literally, she didn't know this, was drinking a gallon of Diet Coke a day. She would fill up a 32-ounce thing of Diet Coke when she went to go drop her kids off at school. When she picked them up, she got another 32-ounce. So that, I think, is excessive, right? That's something that we worked on decreasing over time, but she had not actually even put it together that she was taking that amount in. So for me, it's about helping people first realize what their habits are and where we can make modest changes. I didn't take away her Diet Coke completely. We just obviously wanted to take her down from doing a gallon a day. So I don't get too worried about getting people freaked out about artificial sweeteners or not. We look at how much they're consuming and what other options and habits they can build around them. But in moderation, they've not been shown to produce any more weight gain than anything else. So I guess it's just making sure that people are understanding how it fits in the general lifestyle and make sure they're not over consuming a lot of these things.
Will this be available in a year layback?
Not sure what that quite means. Way back, maybe that was. We will have this for our people that sign on. So people that do sign up for our masterclass will also get the webinar if you guys are interested in that. Definitely, appreciate you guys being here. And I know it was a lot of information in a short amount of time. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity for people to get this information again.
What are some ways that you establish emotional safety with a client? So that, I think
that has a lot to do with the interview process.
Yeah.
So, finding out, one of the big questions I ask for people is what worked for you and what didn't work for you in the past, if they have worked out before. And they go, sometimes it's the program was too intense. Sometimes the personality of the trainer didn't fit with them. Finding out what do they not feel good about. Finding out what their needs are is really important to me. So it's not just the goal of fat loss, but finding out what they had success with, so we can re-emphasize those things, and finding the challenges they had so we can problem solve those things and look to address them. So again, I think from an emotional standpoint, a lot of people feel judged when they're going into a gym setting. So it's making sure that your gym feels welcoming, whether that's the aesthetics, how you greet people, even telling them stories of people that might be similar to them, that might help them feel like this is something I can do too. Because I'll tell you guys a quick story. I call it the cookie story, where it was around the holiday season, and a client of mine asked me, or goes, "Josh, you don't like cookies, right?" And I'm like, "I love cookies. I just don't eat a lot of cookies." He goes, "Well, that's weird, because I just thought you fitness people didn't like, unhealthy foods." And I think there's sometimes a disconnect people feel with us, people who already like fitness, from people that are trying to adapt fitness. So having them relate to other clients, or even having other clients speak to them, or having them attend a seminar that maybe you offer before they sign up, or having information you can provide them, may help with a lot of that.
What are your thoughts on intuitive eating method, or would you still feel that it might be an issue, as it might lead to obsessing over food again?
I think, sorry, not to trounce Jessica, but I think with intuitive eating, again, it depends on the individual. Some people might find it helpful, but I think we have to find out first of what their eating habits are. So when we didn't talk about today, food journaling. I want to find out what you ate, but I also want to find out what you were feeling when you ate it. Were you stressed? Were you fatigued? Did you feel pretty good? Were you shoving it down your mouth because you were in a rush? I think these things, and understanding how people make choices depending upon how they feel, not only helps us, but helps them become more mindful. And this is a simple way we employ mindfulness into understanding the habits that they create around the feelings that they have, especially with different types of foods. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah. Will you be emailing the recording?
We'll do our best, and it may take us a couple of days.
Just reach out to us. It might take a few days to get the recording. So if it's something that you like, you can always reach out at info@ultimatesandbagtraining.com, and then we're happy to send that out. But like I said, it might take a few days.
Do you ask your clients for blood work if a blood panel can reveal high levels of cholesterol? Cortisol, sorry. I don't, because I'm not a medical professional.
Yeah, I think
this is something
I think this is getting sent around too, that trainers should be telling their patients to get blood work. I mean, you should always be encouraging people to see their primary care and getting yearly blood work. But you have to stay kind of within your scope of practice. If you don't know how to read blood work, then I wouldn't be asking them to bring it to you. I would just say, hey, I would really highly encourage you. Maybe if it's a new client, say, have you gotten recent blood work? If they haven't, say, you know what, it'd be really good to get recent blood work. And then maybe in 6 to 12 months, we can repeat it and see if this program has really helped bring down some of those. So that's still a good goal to have too, is to see if we can bring down cholesterol, if we can bring down, for that instance, you said cortisol and things of that nature. But if it's something that's really not in the scope of your practice, I would kind of stay away from it.
I mean, you can ask people to share, if they have had issues in their blood work in the past, things of that nature. But things like cortisol and hormones are kind of funky, because it's only measuring that very moment.
Yeah.
So we don't get unless they do a very specific test for it, where they can do it over the course of a day. But even then, it's only one specific day and not necessarily the course of a week. So again, I would just look at more habits. Habits are going to tell me a lot more than probably some of those things. Some of those things could be genetically related. But I work with trying to identify habits before we get into this other stuff, because people may want to blame it too much on their cortisol and get too worried about their cortisol levels, and that causes havoc too. But like Jessica said, I do always encourage people to at least get a yearly physical. And most GPs, general practitioners, would be up for doing every 6 months to see if they do see positive changes, especially if they've been told to exercise because of poor blood work. General physicians are going to be happy to sort of see if they see improvements.
I heard a program with a physician who mentioned that if and when an individual develops metabolic syndrome earlier on in life, it becomes increasingly more difficult to reverse this condition through their life, to live longer, to put off changing nutrition. So essentially, even if they start to diet and exercise, they don't see the results. Is there any accuracy to the statement? So metabolic syndrome is kind of like a broad term. I'd have to know a little bit more specifics as to like what diagnosis this individual is with. But any type of syndrome or autoimmune condition or any syndrome that stresses the body, yes, it's going to be much more difficult for these individuals to kind of see any progress when it comes to weight loss. That's what we talked about. Oftentimes, people with these autoimmune issues, they have high stress levels. They have emotional trauma, or they have high ACE scores and things like that. So oftentimes when you have something like a quote unquote metabolic syndrome or something like that, we should probably dive a little bit deeper and see what else is going on with that whole person than just focused on, diet and exercise.
I think it's not to get overly complicated. Yeah. I mean, some people develop these genetically, but a lot of times these are developed through trauma.
Yeah.
So then we have another dimension there that can be complicated, as Jessica mentioned, and also the treatments for their metabolic syndromes. If some people are on certain medications, that can make it harder to lose weight. That's why I focus on habits and behavioral changes like, hey, you know what? Let's focus on you coming to the gym twice a week. Let's focus on you adding a protein to your each meal. I'm not going to tell you how much. I'm not going to tell you which protein. I'll give you a list of different ones you can do, but let's try to do that and track that as a goal rather than just focusing upon weight. So we can look at different behavioral changes. That tends to make people feel better. Then, because again, even if the scale doesn't move a ton, they're doing more positive things for themselves, and that probably will have a positive impact upon their emotional well-being too. And being honest with them that it might be slower. It's kind of like having poor genetics in a sense where it can still happen for them. It just might be much slower. So having a different expectation for the rate of the fat loss might be really beneficial. But you also want to inquire things like I just said, like their medications and what specifically, like Jessica said, what the syndrome is, because that's kind of vague and is really unhelpful. I've dealt with people with autoimmune issues. They can still lose weight, but we do have to be cognizant of those other variables at play. It just becomes much more challenging. And you might also want to delve into different types of exercise and really identifying things they enjoy doing and building habits outside of the gym as well.
So these have been all great questions.
Yeah.
So if there's no more questions, like I said, you're more than welcome to reach out for the recording. I don't know when we'll have that, but it is being recorded at this time.
Give us a couple days on it.
And if you guys have any questions about what we're covering in the 6-week class, feel free to reach out.
CEUs or things like that.
Yeah, we're happy to answer any other questions, but we appreciate everyone coming and listening for this hour.
Yeah, so again, I just want to echo that. I appreciate it. We look forward to seeing a lot of you there, and hopefully do another webinar in the next few months. And want to thank again Perform Better for having us, and thank you guys for attending. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.